You know, there's a saying, the only thing harder than becoming a champion is staying a champion. You know, you're on top and everybody wants to knock you down and grab a piece of that belt for themselves. Let's take a look at some of the shortest reigns of Filipino world boxing champions. And for our first example, we have to go all the way back to 1963. 58 years ago, Roberto Cruz knocked out Battling Torres to win the vacant WBA World Super Lightweight title on March 21 and set a record that stood for more than half a century by losing it less than 3 months later via unanimous decision to Eddie Perkins on June 15th of that same year. So that's barely less than 3 months as a world champion. The next fighter to follow in those dubious footsteps is Franklin or Frank Cedeno. This southpaw defeated Charlie Magri by knockout in the 6th round on September 27, 1983 to win the WBC World Flyweight title. But unfortunately, in his very next outing, he lost it to Koji Kobayashi also by knockout, and that was on January 18, 1984. So he barely got past 3 months and lost his world title. What was most impressive about Frank Cedeno was that after that loss, he won 10 of his next fights, 9 of them by knockout, but unfortunately lost his next and only other world title shot against the legendary Gilberto Roman. Here's a very familiar name you probably thought would not be on this kind of a list. In November of 2016, Manny Pacquiao outpointed Jesse Vargas for the WBO World Welterweight Championship. I was at ringside for that fight, and Manny just totally outclassed Vargas, sending him tumbling in one of the early rounds. And Vargas was so nervous despite being much taller and much younger than Pacquiao, and he just embarrassed himself and lost in that fight. Unfortunately for the Pac-Man, on June 2 of 2017, because he was not fighting as often as he used to, Pacquiao lost the title via a very controversial, and if you ask me, fake, unanimous decision against Jeff Horn in Australia. Now, those of you who saw the fight are probably thinking to yourselves, how could he have lost that fight? We're still wondering that to this day. Now, we were talking about Roberto Garcia's record earlier. The first boxer to break that record in over half a century, that dubious title goes to Marvin Sunsona. On September 4, 2009, he defeated Jose Lopez via unanimous decision for the WBO World Super Flyweight title. But in just 77 days, lost it not inside the ring, but on the weighing scale when he was 2.6 pounds over the limit. And in that fight, he still got a draw against Alejandro Hernandez, but inevitably lost it for good in his next fight against Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. Our honorable mention on this list, Milan Melindo, on September 16, 2017, finally, he had already been world champion as the IBF World Light Flyweight King. Then he won the IBO version of that title over Heki Butler via split decision. We all know how Milan Melindo fights. Takes him some time, very methodical. You know, he's not really known to be explosive right off the bat kind of boxer. Unfortunately, on New Year's Eve of that same year, he suffered the first of 2 straight losses and was never in a position to be a world champion again. Now you ask yourself, why is it so hard to repeat as world champion? First of all, there's a certain amount of relaxation that sets in when you finally achieve the goal that you've been working hard for so many years. Secondly, everybody is gunning for you. Everybody's training extra hard to get what you have. And third, sometimes they rush you back into the ring, as in the case of Melindo, and you're not really ready. Your mindset is not, totally focused on winning again, since you've already celebrated as a champion. And lastly, in the case of many Filipino promoters, it's very expensive to hold a world title fight in the Philippines, so they end up fighting overseas in enemy territory.